Good day, everybody. How's it going out there? Well, first video in a while. Hope you guys had a great Thanksgiving, and I hope you guys stayed safe. I had recorded a video for before Thanksgiving, and apparently I never published it, and it was a timely video, so what you gonna do? What you gonna do? Oh, I messed up. And not only did I mess that up, I messed up by forgetting that, Black Friday was a Friday, so I forgot to stream. So my first big fumble, my first big fumble that happened this week. So in essence, there was also something going on in Flayrah, which I had to kind of deal with, or at least discuss, and things like that. So for those of you who don't know, I'm Tantra McNally. I write furry articles for Flayrah.com. These days I mostly help Thabo Meerkat transcribe his videos for the site. And I try to keep up with it, but work has been very, very hard lately, and just me being lazy at the same time. So, you've noticed this, my videos have kind of ebbed for a bit. But every once in a while, when you're talking about writing for news sites, you're going to have some brouhahas. Things are going to happen. And as somebody who's been doing this for a decade, you get used to the brouhahas, right? You get used to the ebbs and the flows, the drama, and things like that. Because it's part of life, and you expose yourself to it, you get used to it, and you kind of go with the flow, and you figure out how to deal with different situations and different items. So this week we're going to talk about one particular thing about ethics of doing nonfiction. And one of those big ethical things is to provide information, accurate information, and to provide information even if somebody doesn't think the information is relevant to the item or to their viewership. Because, in particular, when it comes to people who are selling items and people who are using your platform in order to try to sell something, and basically what that entails and what you owe to your viewership or your readership in regards to that. So we're going to go over a little bit of a background first. So there was and I'll have to pull up the websites here. So there was a recent thing for Flayrah, which is this article here. And this one caused a big old stink. So this furry here, called Mike Retriever, basically posted a link to a campaign where they were going to make a furry version of code words called secret names, and they kind of go over it and things like that. Now, Mike Retriever was a relatively new writer to Flayrah, and I'm going to say I'm going to assume was at this point, because they did like 2 video game reviews. They started back in August. Now, when they posted their first review in August, and when they put it up for our site to adopt, basically, I didn't think too much of it, or at least I did think a little bit of it, but we'll have to go into a little bit of a background here. So Mike Retriever has been a commenter at Flayrah for a bit, right? They're in the comment section and all that. They have particular opinions of people that are not their race. And this came up during one comment thread somewhere, and somebody had shown what Mike Retriever does on Telegram, which is he hangs out in this group that basically does racist memes and racist things, right? And he does it under his own persona name of Mike Retriever. And it is unfortunate, right? It's like if you're clever and you're intelligent, I think you shouldn't, debase yourself by using, words that are demeaning to races and races, creeds, and sexualities. If you think you're clever, you should be able to, make clever jokes that don't do things at the expense of something so shallow as just how somebody was born. But thusly, so the guy had a reputation, and even before the first comment was published, that reputation was known to some of the regulars at Flayrah, and probably even to Green Reaper himself, I'm sure. So basically, when he started writing for Flayrah back in here, he did a commentary on an Atari game. Keep misclicking things. Called Ricky and Vicky. And so when this first came into the publishing thing, so basically when a story comes out, when a story comes out for Flayrah, it's basically put in this publishing box, and it's like, well, you can, the people who are editors basically can edit it and then publish it. Anybody can write for Flayrah, and that's sort of its strength and sort of its weakness. Not a lot of people choose to write for Flayrah, and that's another bag of worms that kind of adds to it. Is that we do take reviews, we do take those kind of things, and I do hope to see more people try to write reviews and try to do those kind of things. And that would be great, because then we could be more persnickety with who we choose to take reviews from, right? The more people who are reviewing, the more we can be persnickety about what they do behind closed doors, or not so behind closed doors. The thing is that when we were looking at publishing the review, my premise of the publishing of the first one was basically the concept that is this, despite what this person does behind closed doors, despite their abhorrent behavior, is this what they're publishing, what they're putting forth to publish to Flayrah, is that content good content? And in this case, yes. Separating the art from the artist. But at the same time, knowing who the person is, going, maybe, there's sort of like this whole, I'm a kind of a naive idiot sometimes when it comes to, putting my foot down for people who do this kind of thing. Going like, if this person does good content, maybe someday they'll go, well, I like doing this and I don't, and maybe they can get rid of, right? They might go, well, I'm so busy writing reviews now or doing reviews that I find more joy in doing that than making shallow jokes or getting some sort of idiotic thrill from saying a forbidden word that I'm not supposed to say. And, maybe he'll grow out of that, right? And give him an opportunity, maybe he'll grow out of that, right? But one of the big caveats in the back of my head was, as long as they're not getting anything out of it. Because that's the thing. There's a difference between utilizing somebody as a resource and supporting somebody. And there's a very, very big line between it. And I think it's something that a lot of people on the left don't understand or don't get right. And what I mean by that is that everyone needs money to live, right? But not everyone should be given power if you know that they'll use that power in a demeaning way. So, for instance, if somebody is racist, you don't give them like manager positions or overseer positions, because they will use their racial biases, in order to hold back some of their employees. Maybe there's some employees that are actually better than them or of a different race, but they'll never want to admit that. So they basically treat those people. And there was this one character on ER, right, who was a surgeon, who I think had that sort of thing going for him, right? He's like an overseer of a surgical position. One of his best surgeons was blacks, and he would treat him so horribly. right? So you had to guess. It's like, And I think there was like one scene where he was like going, "Oh man, this Chris Rock thing is great. Don't you like this Chris Rock guy?" It's like, what? And the black surgeon's like, "What?" I like, okay, yeah, sure. Like Chris Rock is hilarious. Okay, like that, right? So there's that dynamic where if somebody has that trait, that they shouldn't have those kind of positions of power. But there's a difference between having a position of power and just having a position, and I think this is the line where basically a lot of people don't get right, because like, oh, that McDonald's employee is a racist, you should fire him, right? They work as an employee at McDonald's. They're sweeping the freaking floors, or they're flipping the burgers, right? Like, getting them out of the job, or getting them out of that small time job, isn't going to make them come to terms with themselves. All they're going to do is that they're going to go out there and it's like, yeah, see, it is those cabal controlling everything. You can't even have a steady job. And unfortunately, it sort of leads to that sort of thing where those people who are ousted from even the smallest of positions because of their biases end up going home and watching those things that enforce those biases, and because of the behaviors, those behaviors are reinforced. And I think that's sort of the untold damage that can happen in those certain circumstances. So, in my position, when Flayrah published those first articles, I was basically saying, well, we don't pay people to do this stuff. There's somewhat prestige, but the thing of the matter is that like, not a lot of people read Flayrah, right? Not a lot of people even know Flayrah exists. I sometimes go on Twitter and I link to a thing. It's like, oh man, of course they use the word for sauna. It's like, yeah, it's a furry news site, and they're like, what? It's like, yeah, so like it's a hobby. And you get some prestige from it, but it's not. You're not going to become famous in the furry fandom. You're not going to become Popufur or whatever. You're not. It's not something that is going to make you in the upper echelons of furry society. Okay, you're writing about furries, and so I'm not even that popular. Like I'm not even that popular. So, Mike Retriever, if he's writing articles for Flayrah, I was like, well, he's just, but having Flayrah have content like that is good. And hopefully that service, that idea of volunteering and serving for a community, will eventually get him to grow out of the selfish sort of bigotry that he did behind closed doors on the internet, which isn't behind closed doors technically. But there was a line that I had put down, because this is what I was talking about earlier with the line between supporting something and like giving someone support and having somebody work under you, like or provide volunteerism. And the difference is basically, what does the content do? And so basically the two things I had in mind were, he doesn't promote anything that can make him money, number one. And number two, he doesn't promote anything that would bring forth his political nuances, his flavor of political banter that is inaccurate, right? His little cabal and like lizardmen or whatever, right? Whatever he believes behind closed doors that makes him that much of a racist, like that. As long as he's not promoting that toxic viewpoint, and he's not using Flayrah to give himself financial benefit, then basically I was like, okay, he can write reviews and do those kind of things. So he did. He wrote those reviews. He wrote one for Crash Bandicoot, and he wrote one for the Atari game that we mentioned earlier. But then his third article. So his first article was in August. His second article was actually in early November. And his third article was basically a week later. Week or two. Not too much distance between the second and third article. And that third article crossed that very line that I said earlier. This Secret Names game he had as a project for himself. Him being Mike Retriever. And so he promoted his own campaign on Flayrah. And given that he has like all this art and all this stuff set up already and has the campaign all cleared out and good and like all this kind of stuff, like he clearly he was planning this. And to me, in my opinion, this is my opinion, I have no idea if this is true or not, he basically used Flayrah, in my opinion. He basically wanted to dip his toes, right? He wanted to see if Green Reaper, because Green Reaper is so freaking laissez-faire, you could probably be freaking Jeffrey Epstein and he'd be like, oh yeah, I don't see a problem. I mean, that might be why he runs Ink Bunny, but whatever. The thing is, if that is true, like if he was doing that, he just basically was dipping his toes, in my opinion, to basically go, I'm going to make an article here, and basically I'm going to do that. And then he's like, oh, they didn't kick the article off, they published it. Okay, I'm going to write a second article, as a review. And he's like, do that. Okay, they published it. So now I've got the one I actually want to publish, which is my board game campaign. So he wanted to raise like a certain number of dollars, which interestingly, I don't think that's gonna happen at this point. This is like a half a month ago. There's only 13 days left on this. This is an all or nothing campaign. He needs about 5,024 US dollars. He's not even a tenth the way there, and he's halfway through his campaign. This was his. Basically, he used Flayrah, but Flayrah was his only real play. And because Flayrah was his only real play, of course, there were his comments. And the comments was on fire. Like, the comment board got lit up pretty quick. Now, interestingly, and this is kind of a thing that makes me palm my face, is that when Green Reaper published this, because he was the one who actually hit the publish button, I didn't really fully review this until it was fully published, or actually I didn't even fully read it until like somebody had mentioned in the comment section here, this person here had mentioned that he was self-promoting, and in my head I'm like, that was the line that I didn't want to have crossed, so I wrote a comment back on that. And so there's going to be a link in the description below if you want to read through this comment thread. But in essence, I basically described what I described here. And that is, my biggest peeve about it is multiple. I have a little bit multiple peeves. Obviously, Mike Retriever has racist tendencies. And because of that, I was giving him, a bit of a... So there's the comments and stuff. I guess I didn't click this right. So basically Reaper is like, doing jovial conversation. That was the first comment. And he did that right after it was published. And he also like said that on Twitter too. Like he retweeted this and he said something along the lines of, the same thing he put on the comment there. And it's unusual for Green Reaper to quote tweet Flayrah articles. So the fact that he jumps in so early to kind of like smooth things over is just really sus to me. Like if this were a game of what do you call it? Of Among Us, it's like super sus, bro. It's like, is there something about your personality you're not telling us, right? Because if there is, then he definitely keeps it on the low a lot better than Mike does. But I'm not gonna go into that too much because I can't. I can only speculate. But it is super sus, and I wasn't too like didn't please me too much because this is the big thing. Irregardless of that, trying to. This is probably where me and Green Reaper disagree on what the purpose of Flayrah is. Green Reaper probably sees it in news in the traditional sense, and news in the traditional sense has promotional materials. Like, news promotes consumerism, right? It does have a tendency to like promote concerts or promote a band or promote arts and things like that. So the news can be used as a promotional thing. There's a difference between promotional and self-promotional. I've used Flayrah to promote, the documentary The Fandom. I've used it to promote other documentaries like Rookies, and other such, nonfiction works in the fandom. I've used it to review furry video games, things like that. But none of it's my own content. The only time maybe it's maybe my own content is supplementary to the story going on. Maybe I'll link to the video, but that's exceptionally rare. I don't use Flayrah as a self-promotional tool. So when somebody else does it so brazenly, I get a little irked, right? It's because to me it's an ethical thing, and it's not even a personal choice ethical thing. It's an ethical thing which I think should be more standardized in mainstream media as a general. If you're using your platform to promote someone or something, and they're making money off of it, that needs to be presented. So when this was originally published, it didn't even have the disclaimer on it at the very top, where this disclaimer at the very top here that says the article contains promotion of content created by the article's author. That was something that was added by myself and then edited by Green Reaper because it didn't. That's not exactly what it said, but that was the compromise statement that kind of came out of it. To me, there's multiple reasons for this. Number one, actually, when I made the comment here, I said look at the comments below because I wanted people to actually know what they were promoting, right, or who they were actually promoting. Because irregardless of how I feel about Mike or how I feel about anything that would be promoted, people who are consumers have a right to know. And that is one of the biggest ethical things. And I think furries are very, very much into being educated consumers. Furries have a bunch of different philosophies. Some are vegans, some, are, some, want to promote smaller artists. Some want to promote bigger artists. Some want to, they have different things that they want to promote, and they have different stipulations on who they would want to promote, and basically who they wouldn't want to promote, right? Probably more importantly, who they wouldn't want to promote, or what kind of behaviors they wouldn't want their money going towards or promoting. Now, Green Reaper or Mike will say, well, the money is going towards the board game. It's not going towards his philosophies, but that is irrelevant. The consumer is the one who's making the decision. And the consumer would want to know what the behaviors are of the person who is the content creator behind closed doors. Or even out in the open, right? Even if it's very obvious to Green Reaper and people in Flayrah that Mike has this background, it might not be clear to somebody who's coming into our article for the first time. So it is very, very, very important that is on the table. That people can go, hey, this is what this Mike guy does behind closed doors. If you don't want your money supporting somebody who behaves like this, then put your money elsewhere. And thusly why I think his campaign is doing very poorly. And at first, when this whole thing went down, I basically retweeted the article and said, buyer beware. The person who's writing this has been, done racist things. because, you know, I know it's very important to the furry fandom that somebody is pointing that out, even if, you know, Flayrah, when it published it, failed to do so. Luckily, Flayrah is very open about its comment section so that people can have those discussions in the comment section below, because if Green Reaper behaved in sort of the opposite way that, you know, the dog patch or something does, where, you know, he would, like, curate comments, right? Like, we don't, like, you know, Green Reaper's sort of very against curating of comments and content sometimes, for better or for worse. The content in this case, for many people's opinion, is of the worst. And the comments, of course, is for the best, because we couldn't have even had the discussion of, you know, Mike's background and his behaviors, and why many furries might want to support someone like that, even if it's in an artistic endeavor such as that. It's important that they have that information, right? And here's the thing: it's information. You know, Mike sort of like made this sassy thing about, like, or before he blocked me on Twitter, he's like, "You're ruining my campaign," and it's like, I'm not ruining it, right? First off, you know, you thought I was on your side or something, but it's not my job to promote you. Number two, my job is my job is to look out for the best interests of the fandom before myself or before a fellow writer, right? It's my job to ensure that the furries are making the decision that is ultimately clear. I might have been a little bit sassy about it in written form, and I might have been a little bit more pointed, but because I felt like I kind of was betrayed, right? It's like, I'm going to give you a chance, man. I'm going to give you a chance, write some good reviews, you know, promote good furry works. I didn't tell him not to promote himself, but it was kind of that thing in the back of my head. I'm like, if he promotes himself, like, the stuff's gonna hit the fan, right? And I'm not gonna hold back. And that's what happened. He promoted himself. He used Flayrah to promote himself, and without making any amends to the crass and disgusting behaviors that he had committed, you know, against people of other races. It's like, I don't know. Maybe he lives in an area in Spain where, you know, things are pretty, you know, whitewashed, as it were. You know, it does go to show that racism is a worldwide phenomenon. It's not just a thing in the United States, because, you know, Mike is from Spain. But interestingly enough, like, some of the complaints, I think I recall hearing a complaint about, oh, only Americans care about the N-word or something. I don't know if it was Mike that said it. I know one of the furry racists said it from a foreign country. And so I'm thinking it's Mike's, because I don't know too many of them. And he's like, oh, only Americans care about that kind of thing. But here's the nice twist on the story. That's not true. And I know that's not true because one of the big things that happened after the publication of this advertisement was that he gave himself a blowhorn. So basically, at the end of the day, all of a sudden, the artist, who was I can read it here, Kima Designs. So he had basically put himself in a contract with this artist to make these wonderful pictures here, and unfortunately, like, the artist here, unfortunately for Mike, basically backed out as soon as, like, she learned about what he was what her employer, or the person who hired her to do this. I think it's a her. I think I'll just say they from now on. But basically, and by the way, the artist here, from what I can see, is from the same country as Mike. So they're both from Spain. Okay, they're both Spaniards. They both come from Spain. Okay, so no, it's not just you know this concept of not demeaning people for something as skin deep as race and sexuality and things like that, instead of the content of their character, placing all the things on just what you are instead of how you act, and that kind of like concept is not just an American thing. It's a worldwide phenomenon. And, the artist had a right to know that. Obviously, they were kept in the dark. And when they were given information, they wanted to not have their art tied with a project that was led by somebody who would behave that way. And so that was their decision. And many furries probably would not contribute to a campaign knowing it's led by someone like that. But they have to know that information. This works the other way too. If somebody listened to the music of Pepper Coyote, and basically a big part of Pepper Coyote is that he's very political, he's very socialist, he's a Bernie bro. He will, but the thing is, he's very, very public about it, right? You can see it on his Twitter feed, you can see it out in the open. Will that behavior, or will that belief, cause him to lose customers? Sure, absolutely. There's going to be people who say, "Oh, that guy's a commie, I'm not going to give him any money," right? And people have the right to decide that, right? People have the right to decide, well, I don't want to support, I'm not going to support frickin' Sonic Fox because he's just a troll gay guy who plays video games or something. That people will make decisions like that, and the person will probably double down on who they are, right? So in essence, it's an equal playing field in that way. If Mike wants to be a racist unapologetically, then he will deal with the consequences of losing customers because of the way he behaves. Same with Sonic Fox selling merch, or same with Pepper Coyote selling merch. The difference is that politically, one is seen as a more heinous in the fandom than the other. Being a trans black male who goes up there and says, things about Republicans in a game speech doesn't is going to have an impact on some furries' thoughts of him, but not as many as somebody being a flat out racist. That's because just because there are both sides doesn't mean both sides are treated equally within a political group or a group. That's the thing, though. People have to decide on the content of someone's character, and they will make those decisions on what they want to support through that. But they cannot make those decisions if the news pulls the wool over people's eyes. If the news doesn't tell the whole truth about who the content's created by, what kind of things the content does, or the content of the content creator's character. There are some people who can separate the content creator from the content. There are some people who will always like, that what's that horror genre? God, I can't remember it. The one with Cthulhu and stuff like that. Because that guy was a racist, right? And some people can't separate out the content creator from the content. Same with the Wizard of Oz, right? The Wizard of Oz's author was infamous for saying something, horribly about indigenous individuals at the time. And some people are not going to be able to separate that out from the content. And in the furry fandom, a good portion of furries want to know they're supporting a good content creator and not just good content, right? The content creator and the content are tied at the hip. And for those furries, it is our duty to tell people exactly what's going on and exactly what that person is and what that person stands for, or what that person doesn't stand for, or what that person just does blatantly crappy things, right? if we neglect that duty, then we let those individuals down. So that was the decision that basically I had to make in this case. In that case, more information is better. I was like, I'm not going to delete the article. It's out there, right? At this point, after the artist left and all that other stuff, Mike sees it. Mike has basically sort of made a grace from Flayrah. I made my statements like, oh, I might resign over this, and his response to me resigning was like, yeah, you should resign because you broke some rule that's not really right? And like he never really said what rule I broke or whatever. But basically, as you can see in his comment section here, he has his own site, and he did have his own site before he started posting on Flayrah. So sort of like the opposite of Dogpatch, where Dogpatch wrote for Flayrah and then went to Dogpatch Press, where Mike Retriever tried to make his own little review and news site, and then tried to bring the content over to Flayrah until he used Flayrah for his own promotion, which ended up backfiring because of the blowhorn thing. And now it looks like he is sort of quote unquote resigned this, and he's not looking at. He's basically like, well, I'm not going to look at the comments, and if you want to read articles from me, you can go here. So in essence, because you're here and because you make decisions to put your foot down, you basically can determine the outcome, right? You can and that's the whole thing about using power responsibly. Don't if something is wrong, you've got to push. You got to push and say this is wrong. What Flayrah did here was wrong, at least in the initial, right? When they published it without saying who the content creator was and what they stood for, and tried to not bring attention to it, I had issues with it. Over the course of the week, though, after the article was published and the artist left him and all this other stuff happened, it's sort of like, the chickens coming home to roost because of the person's behavior. And it sort of gave me faith. It's like, no, I mean, in spite of the bumpy road, in spite of the bumpy thing, the outcome of this was what it should be, right? The person didn't make amends for their behaviors. They tried to publish themselves and push themselves forward and push forward a furry project without making those amends and without, coming to terms with their behaviors. And the fandom rejected it the fandom, kind of made us think about it because that person had not made amends for their behaviors, right? The comment section indicated that it was within the week, right? He was still making racist jokes and racist statements and being racist within the week, right? So the thing is, I know a bunch of black furries. They're great. They're great. And the thing about going to conventions in the North Americas and going to some of these larger conventions, you really do see the diversity. And a lot of people who are persons of color would say, oh no, it's not really that diverse. There's still a lot of white people. But things you don't understand. I grew up in a very, 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 very white town and very white school. The furry fandom compared to what I was used to growing up with is exceptionally diverse. It is it's black and white, I guess is a way to say it. It's definitely a lot different. And I like the fandom a lot more than I liked the people I grew up with. A lot more than I liked the school that I grew up in. So to me, the people so to me, I would take 10 black furries over any one of the white people that I grew up with in my hometown, right? Because, the race doesn't make a difference. Well, it does make it, it makes a difference in that, we have different experiences, but it does, and different, we have to deal with different situations. Basically, if I get pulled over by a cop, I'm rolling a dice. I'm rolling a D. I'm rolling like a D20, right, to see what the outcome is, and if it's anything less than like 2, it's bad, right? Whereas for a black person, it's rolling a D6, right? And if it's less than 2, it's bad, or it's 2. If it's 2 or less, then it's bad, right? So basically, the probability of something going wrong is a lot less because I'm not in the minority group. But when you're in that position of privilege, as it were, it's your job to bring attention to those who. It's your job to try to sacrifice some of your points, right, or whatever, to bring attention to those kind of things, and to try to make it so that hopefully someday in the future that more and more like the D6 becomes a D10, then it becomes a D12, then it becomes a D, until both of you are rolling that same D20, right, in those situations, until those things can be equalized. Because it is a progress. It's not as simple as flipping a switch or anything like that. And this, in essence, this article was just another bump in that road, right? Somebody was using a privilege that Green Reaper and myself had given them, in essence, to publish works on Flayrah, and they used it for blatant self-promotion. And so, maybe going forward, I should look for people that tend to write really well and things like that, and maybe offer them things instead of waiting for people to come and take power. Because unfortunately, the people who we tend to wait for and they come in, unfortunately, they always have some ulterior motive, right? Or at least it does seem that way. So, maybe doing better about discussing things and stuff like that. No, there's always in the back of my head, it's just start your own site if things keep going bad, or things like that. Maybe trying to do my own thing and sort of erasing from Flayrah or something like that, if things don't improve all that much, might bring some fresh new things to it, especially since I'm doing a lot of work on Flayrah. The fact of the matter is that Green Reaper knows how to run a site, and he's the one that keeps the lights on. So that's his main role, and if he didn't do that, I wouldn't have the platform I do, and I'm very grateful for that. But sometimes he's just either socially ambiguous or just completely blind, right? I feel like I'm like the moral compass, and he's just like the okay, whatever guy. It's like whatever goes. And it's like that's why it's kind of one of those things where it's like, even though I threaten to resign or threaten to make a new thing, sometimes it's better to stay where you are. Because if I didn't, then who would have, made that statement, or made who would have emphasized that stink a little bit more, and basically it would have been a vacuum, and he might have gotten away with it a little bit more. But in essence, that's my big takeaway, is that irregardless, information is the most important thing you get to your reader, and it is our job to make sure that everyone has the whole story behind the content that they're supporting, or the content that they're supporting when they're clicking on links at Flayrah. They should, if we have information that we know about somebody that would influence somebody's purchasing decisions, that information should be shared, and it shouldn't be held back for any reason. My apologies that I kind of was caught off guard by it, and my apologies that obviously I didn't get into it until like the third comment, so I seem like a Johnny-come-lately in that sense. But it was pretty soon thereafter it was published, because I was doing other things. I had work, and I was doing work things over the weekend, and by the time I got home, it was already published, and then the two comments were already there. So, in essence, it's like I was being a bit more reactionary because I was reacting. We do what we can. We're not omnipresent. But together, with information and proper information, I think the right thing usually happens in the end. which is why giving more information is a very important thing when you're talking about nonfiction. But anyways, thank you very much for watching. If you want more information about that, the links for the article are in the description below. The comment section will have mostly everything, the links and things like that, the discussions going around it. If you want more details about the evidence, about Mike's behavior and stuff like that, that is in those comments and things like that. Because, as I said, information, but I didn't really go into too much details about what Mike did behind those closed doors in here, because obviously they're very, very, very rancor words that would probably get me not only demonetized, but probably my video kicked out. So I don't want to repost any of that here. Anyways, thank you very much for watching. We'll see you guys next week. Kick that like, kick the subscribe button, kick a comment in the comment section. Do you think that, what do you think about the whole situation? What do you think about the content creator versus the artist? Like the content, separating the content creator from the content, because that's a big discussion that could be its own video. And how do you feel about it? Are you able to separate the content, the art, from the artist? Right? Are you able to do that, or is that something that you kind of? And I'll probably make a Twitter poll about it too. Anyways, thank you very much for watching. We'll see you again next week.